Okay, well here we are again. Good morning everybody. And I feel compelled to reiterate in slightly more eloquent words what I said a minute ago. Oh wonder, how many goodly creatures are there here. How beauteous mankind is. A brave new world that has such creatures in it. Really, it's just wonderful to see it all today. Really is. Shakespeare, by the way. I'm going to talk this morning about concentration. Concentration it's a word that's translated in several different ways. I'll talk about the root and the translations. It's something that sounds simple, is somewhat confusing, can be very confusing, and can lead us astray. So I want to talk roughly what I want to talk about today, but we'll see where this actually goes. Is what in Buddhist terms concentration is, some of what it isn't, why it matters, some ways we can apply it, some kind of techniques we can use to concentrate, some of the things that can go wrong or we can lose our way, and some of the techniques to apply in those circumstances. So that's kind of the terrain I'd like to cover today. Anna, would you be kind enough to flip those lights on for me, please? Thank you. So first comes really out of the Noble Eightfold Path, right view, right thought, right speech. This is the path of the Four Noble Truths, the path to awakening, the path to complete release from suffering. Right view, right thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, meditation. Broadly, that's lumped into three categories. Sila, Panya, and Samadhi. Sila, moral behavior. So, how we act in the world. Action, thoughts, livelihood. Right action, thoughts, livelihood. Panya, wisdom, which we're also familiar with as prajna, which is the Sanskrit version of the word. And we just chanted about prajna paramita sutra, the Heart Wisdom Sutra. Prajna is the wisdom of really seeing through and seeing reality. That's right view and right thought, or right intention is how that second one's usually translated. And then we have samadhi. It's the third of these three categories. Samadhi has three legs: effort, mindfulness, and concentration. In Pali, those three legs are samma, I think it's viyama, which is effort, samma sati, which is mindfulness, and samma samadhi. Right? So you've got samadhi that's got samadhi nested in it, right? Which is kind of interesting. But those three are all important parts of samadhi, which is why it's got this higher level and this lower level. So there's an idea that in some practice groups there's like this really pushing hard to get the mind still and do this and do that, and that's really working hard. At risk of over-efforting, of putting too much effort in. And then in some traditions there's just sit, just trust, everything will happen. There's a risk of doing too little effort in that. So there's a balance here of what is right effort. Only each of us in our own practice can know what the right effort is. But this samma vayama is right effort, and it's skillful. It's bringing forward skillful practice, and not bringing forward unskillful practice. What's working, what's actually bringing peace, bringing calm, bringing insight is skillful, and what's not isn't. So this right effort is a place for work, a place that we need to pay attention. Samma sati, right, mindfulness. Mindfulness, that word sati, it's as best from what I've read, the best translation is probably more around memory than anything else. It's remembering, recollecting. And it's a lot of the same stuff. It's recollecting what's skillful. It's recollecting what worked and what didn't work, what helped us, what didn't help us. So it's constantly paying attention, being present, being aware, and noticing when we're working to relieve suffering and when we're not, and remembering what's skillful and what's not skillful. That right mindfulness also has nesting in it, because it's what are the elements of right mindfulness? Ardency, alertness, and mindfulness. So be ardent, be energetic, be alert, and be paying attention, be remembering. So this is all fitting under this big umbrella of samma samadhi. So concentration, I'll go there. So concentration, as one of the Noble Eightfold Paths, is very clearly defined, and it is very clearly defined, as these absorption states, which are often, you've heard the word jhana, which is one of the four-letter word in Buddhism, because a lot of people just jhanas don't want to go near there, right? But those are just signposts along the way of settled meditation, and they are descriptive of what happens as we settle. And there's just a natural progression here, where as we settle, we start experiencing peace, we start experiencing pleasant feelings. It's just what happens as we settle in our meditation. So at this point I'm going to go to, so what are we trying to do here? Because this all sounds interesting, but at the moment it's just words. What is this about? What is the purpose of this? One of the core elements of samadhi is ekaggata, which is often translated as one-pointedness, but it's not like the tip of the pen. It's an area of attention. It's not a single point. It's an area or a field. It's just coming down. It's a collecting or a gathering, and it's a bringing together. And what we're trying to do is bring our mind into one place so that we can notice, whether it's our body or our thoughts, we can start to notice impermanence. And when we see impermanence, there's another way this is talked about, which is shamatha and vipassana, which are calming and insight. And those are often separated. I'm going to do insight meditation today, and I'm going to do calming tomorrow. Well, you can try and do that, but they really work together, because as things calm down, you can see more clearly. And as you see more clearly, you're in a position to release, and so things calm down. So those two really work together. And they're at the heart of what we're talking about here. As you get this collectedness together, you can start seeing the impermanence of everything. You get pain in your legs, it goes away. You do a body scan, you notice all the elements of the body. The hair that you're starting with is actually a little bit longer, and there's a few less of them than there were yesterday, and they've got a little bit grayer, right? And then if you go down to your feet, you come back up, and if you're really paying attention, by the time you get back up here again, they've changed again. So the body scan is also a way of tuning into impermanence. And the place where this really, really gets us is our thoughts. Because we tend to identify with our thoughts. We tend to identify with our thoughts. So we tend to take ownership of our thoughts, or really to let our thoughts take ownership of us. So from that place, it's not so easy to be looking at the impermanence of our thoughts if we kind of identify with them. But if we're able to take an objective stance, a phenomenological stance with respect to our thoughts, and be able to see them as phenomena, rather than see them in terms of content or see them in terms of identity, then we can start noticing the impermanence of our thoughts. We can notice the arising of thoughts. If we get really subtle, we can even start noticing where they come from. They come from nowhere. They really come from nowhere. We can start seeing where they come from. We can start feeling they're arising. They're starting to take shape out of this formless cloud kind of thing, and they start to take shape, and then they bubble along and they gain strength and they start moving, and they may have spin-offs and they may start become overwhelming, but eventually every thought fades and goes away. Every single one. Every single one. Most of us go to sleep at least once a day. Somewhere in that period of sleep, the thoughts we had are gone. Every thought comes to an end. they arise, they abide, and they cease. They are impermanent. Once we start seeing the impermanence of thoughts, we can start loosening up the grip that we have around them, or start letting the grip they have on us start loosening up, start to find ourselves getting free of that grip. So there's an idea of concentration being this intentional calming of the mind, and I want my mind to be still. And if it's not still, if I'm chasing after thoughts, if I'm wandering all over the place, I'm not doing it right. Well, again, what are we trying to do here? If we start deciding we want our mind to be still, there is real grasping in there. And there is also, so there's grasping, which is a problem, and there is also a gap between the way things are and the way we want them to be. And if you've sat in this room often enough, you've heard me say, that is the definition of suffering. The gap between the way things are and the way we want them to be, that is suffering. So if we want our mind to be still and the thoughts are wandering off, we're creating suffering in that. So that's not what it's about. What it's about is about seeing the impermanence of the thoughts. And just through seeing their impermanence, there will naturally be space opened up. And it's okay for the thoughts to be running around. If there's space there, then we're present with our thoughts, just like we're present with the pain in our legs. Just like we're present with the noise of the leaf blower outside. It's a choice whether we want to go chasing after the leaf blower. Let me rephrase it. It can become a choice whether we want to go chasing after the leaf blower. For most people in most of their lives, that is not a choice. It just spontaneously happens and we get really upset about it. But we can train our mind so that it becomes a choice whether we go after it. It's still there and we still notice it. We've just chosen not to engage with it. In the same way, pains in our legs, we can notice them, be present with them, watch their arising, abiding and ceasing. Sometimes they arise a little too strongly for us to wait, and that's okay, then we move, but we do it intentionally, recognizing impermanence and all the rest that we're doing here. And the same with our thoughts. As our thoughts become impermanent, as we become aware of the impermanence of thoughts, it becomes much more comfortable to just sit there with the thoughts bubbling around. And they start to lose their power and their energy. Excuse me. They start to lose their power and their energy when we see through them. So not only are we comfortable with just sitting there in this place of peace with thoughts bubbling around and leaf blowers and pains in our legs, but they actually do start to quieten down, and generally the surrounding noise starts going away as well. What more do I want to say about this? There are a number of different approaches to concentration. The classic one is following the breath. And there, you can follow the breath, you can follow it in a place, you can follow it in and out, you can count the breath, and you can count backwards if you want to give the mind more to do. The different layers there all the way through counting backwards, you're giving the mind just a little more to do. And sometimes giving the mind a little more to do allows you to keep a closer hold to be present and allows you to notice more of what's going on. And as you become more in tune and subtle in your awareness, you can start to release those stronger methods and end up just being with the breath. But there are lots of different ways to do that. The Anapanasati Sutta, which is in there's a number of different versions of that. There's the longest one is the one that's normally called the Anapanasati Sutta. There are 16 steps in that, and it goes from breathing in long, I know I'm breathing in long, breathing in short, I know I'm breathing in short, through feeling tones, through observing, gladdening, and calming the mind, liberating the mind. And mind there is chitta, which is heart mind. And then the last segment, the last 4 steps, are noticing impermanence. And then with noticing impermanence, viraga, I think is the word, is there's a fading away, a diminution. As we start to notice the impermanence of stuff, things start to calm down. And then we move to nirodha, which is a cessation. They start to calm down until they actually stop. And the last one, I can't remember the Pali word, but it's a tossing back. It's a complete release. Because there's nothing to hold on to anymore. It's just nothing sticks. This is the story of the Bodhisattva in the Vimalakirti Sutra, where the Arhats are standing, it's the room with Vimalakirti being sick and a whole bunch of Buddhas and Arhats and so forth. And there's petals raining down from heaven. And the flower petals land on the Arhats and they stick. Because there's still something that they're holding on to. The Bodhisattvas, they just slide right off. There's nothing to stick to. So that's the approach we're taking with our concentration, is settling in and seeing the impermanence of everything that comes up. When thoughts come up and we find ourselves caught in thoughts, it's coming into those thoughts and just realizing their shifting, impermanent nature. And you can kind of let them go and they go, or you can stay stuck on them and they spiral and they grow and they become much more than they were. It's seeing their impermanence and gradually letting them go. There's a phrase, there's actually a book by, I've forgotten his name, Uchiyama's teacher, not Uchiyama, yeah, Uchiyama's teacher. It's called Opening the Hand of Thought. And it's not pushing things away, it's just open the hand of thought. It's like let incense come around, it just goes away. There's nothing to hold on to. So stop trying to hold on to it. I think that's probably enough. Let me stop talking right there and see what this brings up for you folks. Questions, comments? Whitney?
I'm trying to map some of what you said onto my meditation experience, and so where I'm struggling a bit is I get that you mentioned singularity, or that single point, everything coming together from it. And for me, the times I think I'm being skillful with concentration, there's something behind that's noticing what's going on in front, basically.
Yeah.
And it's not a single point. When the moments that I achieve that kind of singularity, that feels just like transcendent joy. That does not feel like concentration.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you could...
Thank you. It's a great question. And that's absolutely what happens. Most of the time there's a me paying attention to something. So I'm paying attention, I notice the pain in my leg, I'm there watching my thoughts come and go and seeing the impermanence of thoughts. But when settling really happens, that separation between subject and object just disappears. And that's the real coming together, that's real ikagata, that's the union. So yes, I think that's what you're describing, is being in that place where there is no subject and object and there's just peace. We have this sense of a watcher, and that's historically it's used a lot in the Sanatana Dharma, the practice we call Hinduism, where you look at the observer and then you look at the observer looking at the observer, and it's recursive, you can't get to the end of it. But when we realize the emptiness, so that's the three steps, the three marks of existence are emptiness. If it's empty, sorry, not emptiness, impermanence. If it's impermanence, it's constantly shifting, there's nothing to hold on to. We keep on trying to hold on to stuff. And so we cause suffering. Everything that is fabricated, everything that is conditioned, causes suffering, is suffering. And the third mark is that, therefore, if it's impermanent and it causes suffering, it's not responding to anything I'm trying to do, it's not controllable. Is there anything there of which I can say, this is me, this is mine, this is myself, this is what I am? The answer is no. So if we recognize the truth of that about everything that shows up, then what's left? What's left is what I really am. So the purpose here, if you will, is to be incrementally letting go of everything until there's nothing left. And then you found who you really are. A way of approaching this samma sati is, or the right mindfulness, is Nisargadatta, who said, never forget who you really are. 24/7 by 365, always remember who you really are. And that's what you were pointing at. Does that help, Winnie?
That does.
Thank you. Marcus, and then Bruce.
Yeah, thank you guys for this. Is very timely for me, and you know, my issue probably is that it's thoughts. Of course, it's thoughts. You know, that give me dukkha and clinging to them. But for me, it's recurring thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just thoughts fluttering by. It's deep-seated resentments, thoughts about loss, thoughts about mistakes, those kind of things. And because they are so recurring, then they, for the longest time, for me, it is like, oh, they are therefore permanent. They are therefore, because they always come back, they must be real. So they are, you know, I cannot just say, oh, they don't exist, because they always come back, right? So for me, it is really a little bit more effort to realize, yeah, that they are also impermanent, and that they don't have to come back, and that I can get to a point where they just flutter through, you know. And the more they do that, the more they lose their grip over me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So just for purpose of illustration, I'll ask you a couple of questions. I think from what you've said, I know where this is going to go. But do you have experience in your life where you have had thoughts that you think, this is the way the world is, and then you realize sometime later it's not? It may be like when you were a kid, Santa Claus used to come down the chimney and leave this big pile of presents, and it's, oh, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
certainly, yeah.
So you've got actual experience where you know permanent thoughts are impermanent, right?
Right.
So all thoughts are impermanent, and we've been training ourselves in this for a lifetime, maybe many lifetimes, but we've been training ourselves in this habit pattern, because it's just simply a habit pattern. We've been training ourselves in this habit pattern of recurring thoughts for a long, long time. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to take work to release it.
Mm-hmm.
But we know from the dramatic situation of where we've had things that, oh, that's not true, that it's possible. We also know incrementally there are some of those thoughts just a little less sticky, so we know incrementally our practice is helping.
Yes.
So let's just trust the process and keep going. Bruce and then Arnold.
Yeah, this is sort of along the same lines. Thich Nhat Hanh says that those thoughts arise from what he calls our store consciousness.
Laya Vijnana.
And Goenka calls them the sankharas that are conditioned.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why my thoughts are different from your thoughts, because we have a very different condition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they don't really arise from nowhere. They arise from past conditioning in that sense, which maybe at some point going back is nowhere. Okay, so I think it's a little bit misleading to say that they arise from nowhere, because they are conditioned by our consciousness and our past experience. The other thing is that as they arise, and I think both Thich Nhat Hanh and Goenka would agree with this, the way of dealing with that is to treat them with equanimity.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you don't reject them, you don't embrace them, you just look at them and they go away. The next time they come up, they don't stick around quite as long.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be the process. At least those two teachers have suggested as the way of, I guess, building concentration. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you're not having these recurring thoughts all the time, eventually, if you don't try to push them away, they go away on their own.
So the alive vijnana and still consciousness, that is a construct. And what's the word you use for Goenka's approach?
Well, there's sankhara.
Sankhara. So sankhara just means a conditioned
It's
thing, right? It's just conditioned. So the still consciousness comes from the mind-only school. I can't remember what the Sanskrit for that is, but it's Yogacara. Thank you. It's just a construct out of Yogacara, and it's basically another way of looking at the five aggregates. It's just a way of looking at five aggregates. That's all that really is. And in both cases, those are descriptions of the constructed world. So you already have construction. Where does that construction come from? Actually, it does come from. Nowhere is the wrong word, because that's getting stuck in emptiness, right? But it's like it's not. There's something before that which is not constructed. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to let go of all karma and find complete release. And the equanimity, yes, thank you. As you move through these absorption states, equanimity is, technically that's the fourth jhana, right? I mean, but that's what we're looking at. But it's kind of hard. It is, as a practical matter for many people, it is hard to just say, I've got this really difficult thought. I'm going to look at it with equanimity. I'm going to look at it equanimously. Seeing impermanence is just a technique to help us get to equanimity.
Okay.
That's what that is. Thank you. Anand.
Actually, two things came up. One from Marcus' point. Actually, my son is like that, so he just constructed certain things based on what happened. So he just make it like a like a stone, like carving on the stone. Like that is real, right? So it's hard for to see all the things that made that happen and things change, right? That's I just wanted to share my son's experience. But the second thing is, after our retreat, recent retreat, that gave me some insight into my practice. One, so the whole concentration, the whole samma vyayama, which is the exercise, right? So it was before I was I think making it complex, like looking like too many things. But after the retreat, you spoke about the 12 links of causation. So the main thing I took away is look at that breaking the link, right? After the contact, the perception, right?
Yes.
So I've been concentrating on the perception, how that perception is happening. So that is breaking. It helped me break that perception. So that is what actually is more productive to me. Like it's all the concentration, concentrating on so many different things, because there are so many teachings and so many things, right? So, but at the core, that helping me just focusing on these formations, the perceptions, and that's helping to see the impermanence. That also, as you said, helping to get to the equanimous state, because through meditation, through dhyana, it is maybe it's a long path, but I think this concentration, looking at the perceptions, is what helpful to me.
Thank you. So, Natalie, and then I'll say a few words. You go, Natalie.
Oh, okay. So, from the perspective of somebody who has not practiced for that long, that question is for everybody with a long practice, but also especially for Bruce. What is really helpful for me, and I assume for a lot of other people who are, in the initial stages, are things that are less vague and less obscure and less like beautiful sentences, but things that have clear directions about steps that can be taken in practical terms that do not seem like vague wishful thinking, but like clear procedural explanation of the steps in practice, where you flip from having mostly thoughts and a little bit of concentration here and there, to the reverse, having mostly concentration with thoughts, where you can, how do you do this flip, other than waiting for it to come and not doing anything and just waiting for the thoughts to go away. That might take 20 years, and it might save a practitioner 20 years if there are more clear directions from people who have previous experience and who have jumped from this lower stage into a stage with more concentration. What is something that is, almost like a manual? I realize that there are differences for different people, but I guess as I'm struggling with things are too vague to really be practically helpful.
Let me have a go at answering that first, and then see if others have thoughts. So, thank you. It is a great question, and it's actually teeing up where I was going to go after Anand's question, which is I got to the end of my my words, and I thought that's too much. So this is a good time to come back to it. There are an enormous number of ways of practicing concentration. It is a vast, vast number of ways. We are all wired differently, and different approaches will work differently for each of us. There are a number of Sufi practices. Most famously for most of us, there's the whirling dervishes, and they stand with a post between their big toe and the next toe, and they just stand with their arms thus, and they just slowly circle, and they find a way to do it so that they're in constant smooth motion. Prayer, in many traditions, prayer is a way of direct release of self, and that is a practice that works for a lot of people. In the Buddhist tradition, we're going to go to a number of different Theravadan approaches. You brought up Goenka, and I know you've had Goenka experience as well. Goenka's tradition, as I understand it, his core practice is a body scan, top to bottom, back up. And he talks about just dealing with arisings with equanimity, and that's a way of keeping you centered on something. Tanisara Bhikkhu, who comes from Ajahn Fuang and out of the Thai forest tradition, his approach is to really become intimate with your breath and really follow your breath. And follow your breath as it becomes energy in the body, and use that energy to navigate, move the energy around, find where it feels pleasant. Find where it feels pleasant, where breathing feels pleasant, and stay there and kind of cultivate that and expand it. Find where it's not pleasant and see if there's a way that you can very gently open that up. So there's an awful lot we can do working with the breath, letting the breath become energy in the body. Ajahn Chah, who is the person I follow most closely right now, he is, that's the approach I was really describing, is Ajahn Chah. He just always lands on the 3 marks. Just always lands on the 3 marks. And everything as you start looking for impermanence. And if you can truly see impermanence, you can see there's nothing to hold on to, and that letting go, that equanimity just naturally happens. In the Tibetan tradition, and the Tibetan tradition includes the Burn tradition to me, there is a practice called, Zine, which is just raw concentration, and they use objects. One of them is like a wheel of, it's a series of circles of colours, and they post this card in front of them, and they just sit there staring at the card, concentrating. The Tibetan practice is incredibly sophisticated. There are a lot of practices. One of the more mature practices is visualization. So you cultivate the mind and the strength of mind, so you can actually build a mandala. You can build this very complicated set of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as mental constructs in your mind, and you just hold them there. It takes great powers of strength, mental strength to do that, and concentration to stay there. In the Zen tradition, there are two very different approaches. There's the Rinzai Zen approach, where you receive a koan. I'm going half the Thursdays now I talk about koans, but one of these koans you receive, that's the sound of two hands clapping. What's the sound of one hand? There is not a logical answer to this. So you take that koan and you just keep on repeating that, and that becomes like this thorny ball of hot iron in your belly that you can't hold on to and you can't let go. It's just constantly worrying, and suddenly the mind stalls and you break through. You realize what it means by one hand, and then you get another one and another one. But these are what you use to stay concentrated. And in the Soto Zen tradition, that one, which I practiced for many years, is basically, if you sit still long enough, it'll all go away. And for some people that works great. But most people, I think, needs a little more to hold on to. So a little more to hold on to. The important place to start, though, is to remember what we're trying to accomplish with this. And what we're trying to accomplish isn't blind concentration per se. It's not just this, my mind is empty. It's developing insight. It's developing understanding. It's realizing, I am not this. Truly, deeply realizing, I am not this. This is just stuff. I am no more this than I am this, or this, or this. Because this is all impermanent. And there's nothing in here that is me. So if we remember that is always the purpose, then we play around with different techniques, play around with different constructs that help us move into that, through whichever path works best for us. So with that, what paths have people found, what processes have people found that they find particularly helpful to them in keeping their concentration tight and helping them really settle and really let go? James?
So I was for a long time a big fan of this book, Dharma Illuminated. I don't know.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah. So it's a great book that provides all this really detailed and specific instruction about cultivating concentration. I think that the disclaimer. Oh well, the disclaimer is. I've used it for years, and I've up stages and down stages. But I do think that we have to be careful not to overly identify concentration with progress.
Right.
Because I've personally found there have been phases in my life where I was a lot better at concentration and phases where I was maybe not so good at it. And looking back, I could see that, even during that time in my life where I was doing really well with my concentration practice, I'm still a mess. And the author of The Mind Illuminated also suffered some pretty significant embarrassment late in his career, when he clearly, had achieved a lot of attainments in terms of concentration practice. Right. But he was a mess too. So, concentration is part of the picture, but you don't necessarily want to get wrapped up in, I'm not concentrating well today, I've lost all my progress, or I am concentrating today, I must be enlightened.
But if you don't have a certain, at least minimal level of concentration, you don't have enough mind power to be able to pay attention to the insights or to generate any insights You need some sort of concentration. You know, whatever it is, there's some level that is helpful. And when you don't get this level, then it seems like a, well, I don't want to say a waste of time, but
So the point, I think what James's caveat or rider or whatever, I think is really, really crucial here, which is we tend to judge all this, and the judging itself gets in the way, because there's stuff going on here that is not visible. And you said, you know, there are times when concentration is really strong, but you're a real mess, and there are other times when concentration doesn't feel so strong. But actually, with the hindsight, I know this is true for me, with hindsight, there's a lot more equanimity in life in general. The other side, I'll come to you in just a second. The other side, so Beth and then Katie in just a second, and then we'll wrap up after that. The other side of this is all of our practice is for naught if we're not kind in the world. Because part of I am not this is I am everything. And if I'm not moving to a place where I treat everything with love, then it's not working. So getting overly caught up on our own concentration can lead us astray from that and lead us to get trapped in here. Another one of the paths in this wonderful Tibetan tradition that I don't know as much about as I would like is Shantideva's path, which is the way of the Bodhisattva, which is you start with generosity and you live your life for the benefit of all beings, and that's it. The concentration and the wisdom come right at the end. You're living your life from a place of love for all beings, and that's what you do. And that opens up concentration and presence in a totally different way. Beth, and then Katie.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, I felt that I had completely wasted 6 to 8 years as the world's worst meditator. And then I found out what I was actually doing was insight and mindfulness. And it reminds me very much of Marcus. I had the same things that kept coming up and coming up. And then, like when one is driving or washing the dishes, there's stuff going on, but it's bringing mindfulness and awareness to the stuff that the mind is bringing up. Because there's a part of you that knows what's good for you. It was bringing up stuff that I had to finally confront and look at and work through if I was ever going to progress. And that was really, really beneficial work, and it was about how the mind worked, how we create identity, how we create the world. There was a certain point where those personal stories became so boring, and I was so over them, and it was the process that became fascinating and gave me literally insight to what was going on. And then I could go back to concentration as a much better person.
Let's go to Katie, because we need to wrap up in just a sec. Katie, and then we'll go.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Chanting.
Chanting's another one. Thank you.
For concentration.
Chanting is another very good practice. Thank you, Beth. Katie?
I was just going to say that concentration is a muscle, and it's we can also use sort of a gym theory in that it's just takes practice over and over, and we're just building a muscle. And that metta practice in itself is a concentration practice that I know I use when I'm feeling like, okay, I'm being too hard on myself, which I can be because I'm not good enough at this. And if I just kind of shift over and do some metta practice, that helps to brighten things, bring in my concentration, and bring in some love and some kindness at the same time. And so I find that to be pretty productive. And I think the book that I heard you talk about was The Mind Illuminated, and I also found that to be a really insightful book.
Thank you, Kate. So let's go to our chant cards, and I think it's the inside back cover, the 4 vows. Quick finish up. Being are numberless. I vow to awaken them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to awaken them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.